Want the best way to shop online? Click kccars.com. Want thousands of vehicles at the lowest prices? Click kccars.com. For McCarthy's brand new Chevys, Toyotas, Nissans, Hyundais, and certified and quality pre-owned vehicles all in one place. Over 1,400 new cars and trucks and 500 pre-owned all at your fingertips. Click kccars.com for the McCarthy Auto Group with over 2,000 new and pre-owned vehicles from the ease of your computer, tablet, or phone 24/7. Log on today. kccars.com.
Welcome back. It's Track Talk on Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm Scott. He's Kirk. We're the Racing Boys. Kirk back at Racing Boys HQ in the McCarthy Auto Group studio. Joining us now is a longtime friend of the Racing Boys and really just the number one beat reporter that was at Kansas City Star for many years, and racetoday.com is his website, and he joins us now. Jim Pedley. Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
We're doing well. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And, we've been bugging you to get you on the show about talking a lot about NASCAR, but this is the kind of NASCAR that I think is probably the most satisfying for us, knowing that they're taking care of some of these short track drivers. We know that Richie Evans has made it into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and now the next 25 eligible people for the Hall of Fame, and one of those guys is Larry Phillips. That's a pretty big deal, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting especially for a lot of people around this area. And, boy, he certainly deserves it, and he's got the numbers, and we'll see what happens in about 3 weeks when the people converge on that room to take a vote on it.
Now, Jim, let me ask you, when we break down the numbers, and you're your stat guy, I mean, you do all the due diligence and all the prep work. I know you're doing a story on Larry. Tell us a little bit of some of the stats about Larry Phillips for the people that might not really get a grasp on his accomplishments, just off of the chart, aren't they?
Yeah. I think, Scott, the one that stands out most for me is he went through this incredible decade in the 90s where he won like 220 out of 300 races, 75% winning percentage or something like that. I mean, that's unheard of, and these are NASCAR sanctioned events. And he won, 13 track championships, and he, got weekly championships, or 5 of those, I guess there was. And he's just got these numbers piling up on top of numbers.
We were talking a little bit ago before you came on, Jim, about Larry the Legend and his accomplishments. You hear that 13 championships, those 220 wins out of 300 starts during that period in the 90s. But I think the one thing, and again, we were talking about this, Larry was maybe the king of psychological warfare. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that? When it comes to getting in drivers between their ears when they pull in the track, I don't know if anybody in our region did a better job of that.
Well, I don't know about getting inside the drivers' heads because I never raced against the guy. But I know about getting into the media's head. The times I had to deal with him, he was rugged. He did not, his on-track persona was a lot like his off-track persona. He was all business. He could stare you down, and he could rip you a new one without saying a word. And from what I hear about people who drove against him, I've talked to Mark Martin about him and Rusty, and that's what he was. He was a presence, kind of like almost Earnhardt-ish in the way he would intimidate.
I kind of call him like a John Wayne type of figure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Somebody that was rough and gruff and just you looked at him and they, like you said, could stare you down with eyes of steel. Do you have a story of a time when you tried to interview Larry? Do you have one that you can share with us?
Well, I think my I hesitate to use a favorite. I think the one I remember most is the time he was down in Sedalia, and a bunch of his old drivers were presenting him with a motorcycle. Do you remember that, Scott?
Right.
Yeah, I remember that very well.
Yeah, and Rusty was one of the drivers, and I think Mark Martin had his hands on it. And it was a Harley Davidson that he wanted a long time. And James Ince told me about it. I got to be pretty good friends with James, and so I went down there, and he was going through all the pre-race stuff, and I kind of lingered and lurked in the background, and finally everybody kind of went away, and the racing started, and I went over and kind of introduced myself, and he just kind of looked at me and, gave me a very, hard handshake, and then he just proceeded to watch the race. And, I'm trying to ask him questions, and I'm trying to, get to know this guy a little bit and get inside of his head a little bit and see what's going on.
Try to soften him up a little bit during the interview, right?
Exactly, but he's
right.
fixated on what's going on at the track. And I'm kind of looking over at his eyes, and kind of, just studying the man's face and stuff like that. And man, he was the Rock of Gibraltar, and he just watched that thing. And when we finally did get to talk, he did display a human side, but it was just this almost tangible, Scott, intensity with this man. And that's what I remember about the guys, how intense he was. Yeah. So I guess that's probably the best recollection I have.
Jim, you interviewed Mark Martin and Rusty Wallace on occasion about Larry Phillips, and they revered the man in a way that most race car drivers don't revere anybody. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the time when it was driven home to me the most was one of these things where you go into a NASCAR or a Cup drivers hauler at a race and you just kind of sit down and BS with them. I went and saw Rusty one day. And, talk was going all over the board, how Rusty is. And for some reason, I brought up Larry Phillips' name because I knew, Missouri guys and stuff like that. And he looked me in the eye, square, and just said, best race car driver I've ever seen in my life. And, I said, well, best ever or best at that level or whatever. He says, no, best I've ever seen in my life. And that stuck with me. I mean, that's Rusty, pretty fair driver himself, calling him the best ever. And then when I pressed him a little bit, well, could he have done it at this level? And he's like, he could have done it at any level, believe me. Well, why didn't he? Because he didn't want to put up with the BS. It seemed to be, that seemed to be the answer to that question.
Interesting.
Yeah, he didn't want to move down there, and he just didn't want to leave Springfield, Missouri. I think that was the bottom line. But had he done so, I don't think there's any argument that he would have been one of the legendary racers that even the NASCAR at the Sprint Cup level had ever seen.
Well, apparently the people who knew him, who reached that level, say exactly what you're saying, Kirk. He was, he had the ability, and he certainly had the intensity, and he could have done it at any level he would have wanted.
Jim, let's talk about the process now to get him into the Hall of Fame, what you expect to happen. I know you're a voting member, I believe. Yes. Tell us a little bit about the process and what you foresee happening now that he has been put into eligibility. Yes.
Well, I think there's, 26 voters these days, and we all kind of converge on Charlotte the week before the 600. On the Wednesday before the 600, and we go to the Charlotte Convention Center, which is downtown, and there's like a room there, kind of a very small ballroom, and they have tables set up, and all the voters sit there, and for as long as it takes, people talk about the drivers who have been nominated for that year's class, and people will stand up and say, well, here's the thing about this guy, and I remember this guy. And it's pretty heavy stuff because, people like Junior Johnson are there and the King is there and, Bud Moore and people like that. And it's kind of neat hearing the old stories. But anyway, that's the process. People stand up, and when people finally have nothing left to say about any of the candidates, they pass out the ballots. And you vote, and then everybody leaves the room, and they call you back in around, 5, 6 in the afternoon and tell you who made it that year.
Yeah. Now, Jim, were you the one that put Larry's name in the hat? How did that process take place?
Well, there's a separate nominating committee. There's the voting committee, which I'm part of, and then there's a separated nominating committee. And he was put in by those people. And there's some pretty heavy people on that list, too. There's more promoters. There's track owners. There's NASCAR officials. The Francis are on there, and Steve O'Donnell and all those people, and a couple of drivers, and they come up on a separate vote and pick 5 people to go in for that year's, new people to go in for that year's class.
How many years do you think, how soon maybe years is too strong? I mean, I would assume that it's going to take a couple years to get in, but what do you foresee on the amount of time that it would take for somebody, because we see that Richie Evans is in, and we're glad that they're recognizing our short track racers and the guys that really built the foundation of our sport through a certain period. What do you think as far as timeline?
Well, I was pretty convinced when when the names came out, Scott, and I saw Larry's on there, the first thing was I was pretty happy because I'm biased in favor of the guy, and I was very happy to see the name there. And then I started to think, what are his chances? And then I looked at who else is on the list this year. It includes people like Fireball, and Maurice Petty and Freddie Lorenzen and Jack Ingram, and the list goes on and on of legends. And I thought, well, it's going to be tough sledding for a while. And then when the Kansas race rolled around, there was a couple other voters who were there, like Kenny Bruce and Nate Ryan, and I kind of tossed his name out there. And Kenny, a long-term writer for NASCAR Scene and several other publications, says I think he's got a chance. And I said, first ballot. He says, well, it's possible. I mean, I don't think it's as far-fetched as you may think. And
so we could possibly. You're thinking that we could see it in the next year or two. Then it's very possible.
I think so. I mean, I didn't expect Richie Evans, to make it as soon as he did. And then last year, Jerry Cook got a lot of attention in that room. A lot of people stood up, and I know he got votes. And I would say, they don't release this, but they elected 5 people last year. I bet he was 6th or 7th in terms of getting votes. Which bodes well for somebody like this, because it's good to see the people know the importance of these guys. Right. And so I don't know. He's got a lot. Larry Phillips has got a reputation out there that's pretty darn good. The fact that he got nominated is big. Will he have enough on that voting day to get in this year? A month ago, Kirk, I would have said no way. Now I'm thinking, after talking to people, people do know about this guy that I wouldn't expect would know about this guy. So I would not be totally shocked if he got in this year, but I don't think he will. But I think his time's definitely going to come.
I think you already answered the question I was going to ask about Richie Evans. You are surprised that he got in so soon. Are you surprised that Rusty Wallace made it in so soon?
Very. To be completely honest, I did not vote for him on the first ballot, and just when you look at that list and some of the pioneers on there. And, Rusty's a champion, but there's people on there, who've done a lot for the sport, especially some old timers, and it wasn't like, I'm not going to vote for him. He's out. But it was a tough decision, and I went a different direction when it came down to my 5th choice. But I was pretty surprised, Kirk. I really was. Were you?
Yes, I did. I mean, I thought he would get in at some point, but not this Quickly.
Right.
I mean, Rusty Wallace, as great a driver as he won a lot of races, but he never won a restrictor plate race, Daytona 500. He won 1 championship, but there was a lot that he didn't accomplish either. But he still belongs in the Hall of Fame. I just didn't think it'd be this quickly.
Right.
You know what they take into consideration down there, and I'm completely for this, is not just numbers, but what somebody has done for the sport. And that's where like Earnhardt got in the first ballot. Part of this because he did so much for elevating the profile of the sport. And Rusty was out there, and he was in those funny early commercials for Miller Lite, the time travel ones, and he's been a spokesman, and he's been stumping for the sport, and I think that goes a long way with some of the people on the nominating committee and the voting committee. So, and I don't have a problem with that. I think it shouldn't just be about numbers. Bring the personas in a little bit, and I think that's how Rusty got in.
Yeah, a Hall of Famer really has to transcend the sport in some way, does he not? I mean, it's like a Hall of Famer when you see one. It's got to be somebody that transcends the sport in a big way and is a generational figure. What's your definition of a Hall of Famer?
Well, that's been one of the big questions. I've been doing this since the beginning now. This will be my 5th year. And one of the big questions as we mill around there waiting to vote and waiting for the thing to start is there's really no definition out there to apply to people by purpose. They don't want to say, this is just about X or this is just about Y. They kind of leave it, as you say, if it feels like a Hall of Famer in your gut, that goes for a lot. So, it's there's no real true definition. Here's what you must consider. You consider everything about the guy. And that's I guess, Kirk, is how I define it. Yes, numbers are important, but somebody like a Fireball, who is a colorful character, or Curtis Turner was a very colorful character. They didn't have the massive wins and championships, but boy, they people knew those names back in those days, didn't they?
Oh, even today, for that matter.
Yeah, I think so. The younger generation of fans, I don't know. I hope they know who these guys are.
Maybe I'm dating myself just a little bit there, Jim.
Yeah,
let me ask you. I've been a part of a Hall of Fame committee. It was just the Central Auto Racing Boosters Hall of Fame committee, and sometimes they try to bring in more people. Like they'll have I can't remember how they phrased it, but it was like a special group of people, and they put as many as 15 people in. 5 is a good number, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to try to put too many in there in one class, because if you do, it kind of waters down and devalues the overall concept of being special in of all these drivers. How do you feel about that?
Well, the first year, Scott, I was 100% with you that, and I stood up in that room that day and said that. And this is the first class. This is the first class of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It should be the best of the best. It should be. Right. I like 5. I think we can get 5 people deserving in there. I wish it would have been 6, so Pearson could have gotten in on first ballot. But I thought, yes, this is very special, and to be in that first class, that's blue ribbon in any superlative you want to put on it. And then the next class, each succeeding class, I felt a little bit differently about it, and I was taking calls from people.
Really?
Saying, well, how are you going to get people into this hall? It's going to be 25 years before there's something to see in this hall. And basically, Scott, those are from people who haven't been in the hall. There's a lot to see there. There may only be 20 guys in there right now, but there's a lot of things to see in that Hall of Fame down there.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I've gone back and forth on this, and I think 10 was a good number at one point. But now, as the years go on, yes, 5 is a good number each year.
All right, Jim, before we let you go, we're up against the break, but I got to ask you, how's the Hall of Fame doing? I know it hasn't been as profitable as they were hoped. In fact, I think NASCAR is even decided or offered not to take any revenue earned. Maybe I'm misspeaking here. So just give us a little overtake of how the Hall of Fame is going since it's opened up down in Charlotte.
Well, I don't have the numbers, and I don't. All I can tell you is what my gut tells me when you talk to the people down there. Everybody's excited about it, and it is a good thing. I urge everybody to go. But no, I don't think they're cutting a profit. And but when it comes to something like this, I don't know if it is all about profit. I don't think I don't think Cooperstown and Canton cut a huge profit. Theirs comes from games and stuff like that. I mean, this is something like kind of like the police department. It should be supported, even though there's no profit in the long run. I think it's got to be.
I agree with you, but, I'm a little self-serving there because Kansas City was up, and I know that everybody, when they put the proposals in and it was trying to get the Hall of Fame, they kind of inflate the numbers and paint a really rosy picture, and I know everybody did that, and obviously the Hall of Fame needed to be in Charlotte, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should have had it in Kansas City because I think it ended up where it's supposed to be, but, all in all, we want it to be successful, and we're glad that they're recognizing the pioneers of our sport in NASCAR. Jim, thanks so much. How's the website Racing Today going for you, bud?
We're chugging along. It's a labor of love, I think most of our guys we're all former beat writers from newspapers, and we just write when we feel like it, and write what we feel about, and write from our guts, and go to some races, and try and keep that kind of maybe old school kind of racing writing alive with it.
Well, yeah, one of your biggest fans is John Force. We'll be seeing him in a couple of weeks, and he gave your website, RacinToday.com, a glowing recommendation about the writers and how he deals with the media. Is he the best at dealing with the media as far as big name race car drivers?
if you got a lot of tape in your recorder, he's wonderful. I mean, he wasn't much fun on deadline.
Right.
You couldn't get away from the guy. But he gets it. He gets this thing, and I wish they would spread like crazy across all of racing, because I think it's good for the fans, and I think it's good for the sport, and you love to see that stuff.
Well,
Jim,
Yeah, I just one quick thing before we wrap up now. The media has changed so much. I mean, you work for major newspapers. You have writers on the website, major newspapers. What's coming up in the future as far as covering the media and make sure that, good writers still make a living in this business?
Well, it's been an education the last couple of years, going into media centers and seeing who's there and seeing who's left and seeing what they're doing, how they're doing. I see people sit around those media centers these days and never leave the place. They sit there on Twitter all day and and don't go to the garages and they don't establish contacts, and that's kind of concerning. So
they're not really a beat writer anymore, are they?
Not really. It's a different thing. It's social media, and long form journalism is out.
Yeah, Jim, thanks so much. We miss your read in the Star. Always the best. Good luck with you at RacinToday.com, and thanks for being on the show with us, our friend.
Boys, anytime.
Appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right,
Thanks,
you.
Jim.
All right, there's Jim Pedley, one of the great ones, and a voting member of the Hall of Fame. We're running late. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll open up our phone lines, 913-381-0810, 913-381-0810. You want to call in and talk about Larry, we'll talk a little NASCAR. If you want to talk about the local racing scene, where we're at with all the weather and Mother Nature, we can do that as well. Again, 913-381-0810. We'll be back with more Track Talk brought to you by McCarthy Auto Group in a moment.